Harold, thank you so much for being here and to accept this invitation.
Oh, you're
Um,
welcome. Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
no, it's incredible. It's amazing how technology can connect us, and we are so far away in two different
So,
continents. So this is amazing. And I hope one day you would like, we're going to extend the invitation to you. So hopefully one day you can come all the way to South America. I don't know if you have traveled all the way to
oh, thank you. I would love. That's something I would love to do. Yeah,
yeah,
when
nice.
things get back to some kind of new normal.
Great. Yes, yes, we're all hoping that. So let's get into it.
Okay.
I'm gonna post the link in the chat room, the second link that we have, because I have a
Okay.
feeling that 40 minutes is not gonna be good enough.
Oh, so that's an actual continuation that we would have to jump over onto.
Yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm going to do that in a minute or so, just right, when we're getting towards 20 minutes past, and then we'll just remind our all the people that are here that we should just connect to the next link later on. Is that okay?
I understand. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. So we'll start a new meeting if we run out of time.
That's right.
Okay.
So Harold Underdown from New
Right?
York, is that right?
Yep.
And Harold, the best way to introduce you, I think that is better if it comes from you and you tell us three things that describes you in your professional work. So everybody here in Brazil have an idea and an understanding. Why are we connecting today? And of course, we're going to talk about the editorial market, but it would
Mhm.
be nice hearing from you. Can you describe yourself in 3 words?
In
Professional
three
ways. What
words.
does Harold do?
Well, I'm an independent editor. I've worked in publishing for more than 30 years now. Some of that in-house, and some of that on my own. And I'm someone who follows the industry and writes about it on my website. And I wrote the Complete Idiot's Guide to Publishing Children's Books. So I try to keep up with what's going on and to make myself available in different places as someone who can answer questions and talk about what's going on in the business.
And following the trends, of course, every time that you have to do another edition, I'm sure that there's a lot of things that keep changing.
Well,
Uh,
that's right. And with actually, it's funny with my Idiot's Guide, we haven't done a new edition in more than 10 years. The
really?
publisher, yeah, the publisher changed the way that they approach doing them. They used to do frequent revisions, and they've stopped doing that. So I've decided to create a kind of virtual 4th edition on my website, and I'm going to go through the book chapter by chapter. I just started last week, and I'm going to update the chapters as necessary. Some of them don't need to be updated, and if that's the case, I will say so. But where there's information about current books as examples or trends in the business or things that have simply changed since I wrote them 10 years ago, I'm going to post that on my website, and people will be able to consult both the print book and the updates as I develop them.
Yeah, definitely. This is a good time because there's going to be a lot of rich material to enhance and add on to that book. So we're in the perfect time of, renovating,
Right.
also reinventing. And, that's what also this conversation is about. It's about reinventing, thinking positive, figure out ways how we can exit out of all this chaos. And I'm sure that when people connect and their minds work together, that's when things happen, right?
That's
And let's
definitely
hope
true.
that we
Yes.
can spark some, I don't know, suggestions, inspirations, comments that can help to all of us from all the line, the chain production, because we have this market, we know that is affecting to libraries, to bookstores, schools, authors, illustrators, of course, printing as well, because the printing is
Right.
going to be definitely also having a curve, and also, you know, publishers. It doesn't matter if you're an independent publisher or a self author that just published as well, that we see that coming more often, an author publishing, you know, by herself or himself. And of course, the editorial business, we are going to see a lot of joins. And we just saw yesterday a new joint, an acquisition that was announced. And we're going to see those coming, you know, more and more globally.
So you're talking about Candlewick
Oh,
Walker
well,
Book
yes,
being
yes,
acquired by Crossbridge. Yeah,
yes.
I wouldn't attribute that directly to the pandemic,
It
because
was from,
that's the kind of deal that takes months to set up.
definitely.
And I'm sure it was in the works before. In fact, I think they said so in their announcement that it was in the works before the pandemic happened. So we'll have to wait and see if there's more kinds of acquisitions or mergers that emerge later
Yes,
in the pandemic. And you know, who's to say what's going to happen?
that's true.
Because there's no precedent for what's going on. And I would really encourage everybody who's watching to follow the news as closely as they can. And it's easy to do that in some ways right now, because resources like Publishers Weekly have made their digital editions free. So you
Nice.
can read cover to cover every weekly edition of Publishers Weekly. When they put it up on their website, you can be just as well informed as anybody else about what's going on in the business. And I think that's important to do, because, you know, it's easy for me or anybody else to make big sweeping predictions about what's going to happen. But you know what? Nobody really knows.
That's
And
true.
we're
No,
just going to have to see. Things are definitely being affected by the virus in all the different aspects of publishing in the United States, and I'm sure in Brazil as well. And some parts of the business are less affected than others. You know, I've read stories about publishers are still acquiring, they're signing up manuscripts, they're still releasing books in one way or another. But on the other hand, they're also cutting back. They're furloughing workers. They've had to start working remotely as much as they could. So, you know, there's a lot happening. And I would definitely encourage people, watch what's happening, follow those news sources.
yeah, definitely. I agree with you. The joint that we heard yesterday, of course, this takes lots of months or even years to put something like that together. And definitely, I think you already answered also some of the questions that they want to know, especially the authors and illustrators. Is this a good time to send, you know, things? Are they accepting new, you know, texts? And you already answered, because I guess it depends
Well,
on
I
the
think I
individual.
should probably say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, definitely.
You
So
know,
that is great.
we've only been in the shutdown in the United States for 2 months now.
Same here,
And,
likewise.
yep.
Yep.
And 2 months is not a long time in publishing. So there's been some initial reaction, but if you look back to the 2008 recession, which of course was a completely different kind of event,
Yes,
it took some time for the impact to be felt and for publishers to really start changing what they were doing.
that's
I remember that in the 2008 recession, I was hearing stories from people working in-house that although their publisher hadn't announced anything, they were making a big slowdown on acquisitions. And it played out actually at the acquisition meeting level, that people would take projects to acquisitions and normally they would have gone through. But all of a sudden, most of the projects that were coming to acquisitions were being turned down. So there was a slowdown happening at that point, even though there wasn't an official policy being announced.
Yes.
And, you know, different publishers responded differently back then to those economic conditions. And I think we can expect the same kind of thing here. Right now, definitely publishers are still acquiring, agents are still sending out manuscripts, agents are looking at manuscripts.
Yeah.
Where we're going to be in 3 more months,
We
you know,
don't. Yeah,
we don't know.
and also authors. Some authors, I hear they cannot write. They are busy at home. They have kids. Some others are in their cave. As you know, authors, they live in a cave anyways, because that's the time to produce. That's the place to produce, if
Right.
you want to say so. And it doesn't matter if you are a morning person or an owl, a night person. But you also have that in consideration. Some authors, they are not writing, and some others, this is the time that they are just, creating like crazy, pandemic, non-pandemic texts, anything, right? So that's
Yeah.
another thing we might see, a lot of positive, a lot of, what happened or guesses, science fiction, like we're living already a science fiction, we're all the characters of this book in the real life, and we're experiencing this, and nobody thought that this science
Yeah.
fiction was going to happen in real life, right? So this is crazy. So let me ask you something. I'm very curious to know, and especially for our um, um, audience in Brazil, which are the big five? I think I know, but I'm not sure. The big five in the publishing industry in US.
Well, I guess I would call the big five maybe the big six now.
Uh-huh.
The really big one is the company I like to call Random Penguin, even
Okay.
though that's not their official name.
Yes.
Their official name is Penguin Random House, and they are by far the largest publisher in the country, not just in children's books, but in general.
Okay.
So PRH is one. Then other companies that are also quite large are Simon and Schuster, Harcourt, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. I always forget which way to say that.
Is it Harper Collins? Is that what you said? Or
HarperCollins? No,
okay.
I said HMH.
Okay.
Harper, Houghton Mifflin. HarperCollins. Disney, though they've made some interesting publishing changes recently.
Definitely.
By kind of like dumping the books that they didn't have all the rights to and selling them to Little Brown. And so Little Brown, which is part of Hachette, is a big one. And then there's Scholastic and Macmillan US. So maybe 7 big to medium big publishers.
Yeah. And where does
maybe Trustbridge is aiming to become a big publisher kind of by accumulation, because now they own Holiday House, Peachtree, and they've just acquired Candlewood.
Yes, we read that. And what about Chronicle Books? Is Chronicle Books within that list considered, or that's
Chronicle would be considered a mid-sized publisher.
A mid-size, okay.
There are quite a few of those. And Emma Dryden's just posted in the chat that the big five by sales are Hachette, HarperCollins, Macmillan, Penguin Random House, and Simon and Schuster. So I'm throwing in a couple other publishers just because they're also big, but those are the top 5. Thank you, Emma.
That's great. Thank you. I am not reading right now the comments. I'm just focusing right now on the questions and talking to Harold, because part of it, I need to learn to do 2 things at the same time, so I'm not smart. To do multitasking in the technical area.
I've been doing Zoom webinars for years now, and I have a habit of checking the chat because people throw things in there that you need to respond.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So let's jump into the questions that I had sent you. I have them here.
Sure.
So the first question is, do you see children's pictures books lending themselves in ebook format?
Okay, so children's books and picture books in particular in ebook format. It's interesting that we're still talking about this.
Yes.
20 years after ebooks really became a thing. and 13 years after the Kindle first launched. And
Yes.
the reason we're doing that is that a lot of the kind of mass market, I guess you would call them, ebook formats, like the Kindle format or the Microsoft Reader format before that, which was really the first one that was an attempt to have a, you know, widely usable format. They're good for narrative, for plain text, that can be reflowed depending on the size of your screen. They're really not great when it comes to illustrations and design and book layouts that you want to keep in some kind of fixed sense from page to page to page. And so we found some kind of compromises. And I remember, and this is, like I said, this is 20 years ago. I was very early on, I was involved with an imprint called iPicture Books that Byron Price, who was a packager and a kind of industry innovator in some ways, he started up about 20 years ago. And the idea was to do children's ebooks. And we quickly discovered that the Microsoft Reader format that existed then had a lot of limitations. And you could only do certain kinds of stories with them, or you had to live with those limitations. If we wanted to present a children's book in something like a book format, you would go with something like a PDF, the PDF format that we have today, that keeps the formatting of a document and the design of a document. That existed even then, 20 years ago. And I remember working on some out-of-print books that we had acquired, and they were classic books with gorgeous designs, and I wanted to maintain that design for our presentation as an ebook. And we were able to do that. The problem is, of course, if you're presenting a book on screen, you have to live with the size of the screen. So if you have a children's picture book that was originally 8 by 10 inches, and when you open it up, it's 16 inches wide and 10 inches high, it's just not going to be the same on most computer screens. So you have to make compromises. I think people always talk about how, oh, well, you know, you can't cuddle with a screen in the way that you can cuddle with a book. You know, that the sharing of the picture book on your lap, right? Which is true, but you know, there are companies like Epic that have found ways to present picture books and children's books of other kinds on screen in an acceptable kind of way. But, you know, we're not going to ever replace the print books that exist now with all electronic. It's just that we'll have electronic as another option. So, you know, it's not an either or. For a long time, there was this idea that, oh, well, you know, print books are going to go away. And I never thought that was true. And I think it's very clear it's not by this point. But ebooks can still be an alternative for people who can't get to print books. That's certainly an option right now. You know, if you can't get to your library, you can check out books electronically. So
saying that there's a huge controversy right now with different publishers around the world, because you have the wonderful storytellers and the bloggers, and they are, you know, they are doing it, of course, by two different reasons. The monetary, because if you have a YouTube, you are definitely, you know, having an income, to say it like that way. And of course, you do it because you love to read books, right? And of course, a lot of publishers in the beginning, you know, I heard here, at least I'm speaking from here, it's wonderful and great because I cannot sell the book right now because the bookstores are closed and this wonderful influencer is reading the book. But later on, we started seeing read the clause of each publisher. If you can really share that, you know, book and read it, because the sales might drop too. So it's kind of like a very delicate situation, you know, because at the end of the day, it's your audience, and you don't want to piss off your audience. And right now,
Right.
there's emotions
Right.
flowing like crazy. Everybody is feeling in a different way. They have different moods during the day. So these are delicate situations and
Right.
decisions to say, I want my book and you can have it and you can read it all, or I don't want you to read my book.
Right. Well, I mean, that's why publishers have responded to requests, and they've posted policies for how teachers, for example, could do performances
Yes.
of their books. But I think there's a very, in publishing at least, we understand this, and maybe the average consumer does not, which is part of the issue. There's a difference between reading a book to your child or in a classroom in a limited kind of setting, and reading it, performing it in effect on screen
Yes.
in a video that can be seen by hundreds of thousands of people, and as you mentioned, can earn the person who's doing the reading money. That's a public performance, and
Yeah.
that person needs to get a license to do that kind of public performance. They just do. There's no bones about that. That's just the reality.
That's true.
Um,
That's true.
but I
Yeah.
think when it comes to other uses, that uses in an educational setting, and obviously, of course, at home, people can do what they want, and publishers have been very quick to let people know about that.
Definitely. That was so funny. That just reminds me, I just saw in my mind a picture when you said they should have a license. When we started with the Uber concept. The Uber concept, again, you're reinventing a new model, right? And some
Right.
people are gonna love it and some people are not gonna like it. And
Right.
it's funny. I don't know why I did that, like a metaphor or not, but it's just a picture that came on my mind. So the second question is, what are some of the future trends you see influencing children's books going forward in terms of style, format, presentation, content?
So that's an interesting question, the future trends. And if I knew what the future trends were, I would be busily right now creating books that would meet up with them. The interesting thing about publishing is that we're always hit unexpectedly by the new developments. I mean, remember what happened with Harry Potter?
Yes.
When I was getting started in publishing, we would have to struggle to push a middle grade novel of more than 160 pages through our acquisition process. The publishers just didn't want to do long novels for middle grade. It's like, we can't do this. And fantasy was something that only a few publishers were interested in, and even then in very limited ways.
Yeah.
So then Harry Potter came along, and nobody was expecting it. And all of a sudden, 300 and 400 and 500 page books not only became acceptable, but they became in demand. And you saw, I've noticed this, and it's been written about, that publishers would even design some books with very generous space between the lines to bulk them up so that they'd look more substantial.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's coming. I can tell you that I think one of the most interesting things that's happened in the past 20 years has been the establishment of the graphic novel format as a mainstream format in children's and YA publishing.
Yeah.
And obviously, graphic novels and that format go back a lot longer, because we've had comic books for, I don't know how long, probably more than 100 years. I'm not a comic book expert, but we've had them a long time.
Yeah.
And but it's only been within the last 20 years or so that graphic novels have become a kind of standard format in our industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a way that they were not before.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, because graphic novels are a different kind of storytelling from the standard novel. And it's kind of like taking the picture book approach, where you tell the story both visually and with the text. It's taking that approach in an even more sophisticated way, taking it to older readers.
Definitely.
So
it has a rich vocabulary, you know. I'm a teacher and I have been teaching now for 18 years. And I remember, like, you know, let's say 20 years ago, they would not accept a comic book part of the books in your classroom because they would say, oh, this is not literacy. And I, in the contrary, would love to have freedom of choices. And I would encourage my students to bring any book they wanted with lot of text, with, you know, simple text, no text at all, comics, because for me, I'm nurturing reading. And nurturing reading is not a medicine. You cannot tell the child, you know, open your mouth and drink this medicine.
Right.
If they don't need to. On the contrary, right? You have to nurturing, eat an apple every day so you're away from the doctor. And that is being conscious and nurturing a healthy style of life. And it's a habit. We know that reading becomes a habit, right? So we have to encourage that, and they have to see us reading. I would read too sometimes, so they could see that during, you know, times that I didn't have to be in the recess with them, I would just find a nice place where to read, and children will pass and they would see me, oh, my teacher is reading. So, you know, that's like, okay, it's called monkey do, monkey something, right? Copy or something.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's phenomenal. Bologna Book Fair, the International Bologna Book Fair. In matter of fact, this year, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the first year they are having a prize of graphic novels. And in 2021, they're gonna have a whole aisle and exhibition about graphic and comic books.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and that just shows you the graphic novels really have arrived. That they're no longer really a new thing. That they're actually here already.
Yeah, maybe.
And I can't tell you what's going to be the next graphic novel or the next Harry Potter, but I am fairly confident that something, you know, that new things will come along. I think that's one of the wonderful things about publishing, that it's always changing, and we don't know what the next new exciting thing is going to be, but I know there's going to be one, and it's really wonderful year after year seeing what happens and what new books are being published, because there is always something new.
And there's a lot of talent, new illustrators from different parts of the world. The world is getting much more smaller. Through Instagram, you have at your fingertip any illustrator from any part of the world. And that makes rich also the story, right? That makes it even more beautiful. And of course, we globalize and we diversify the themes with illustrations as well. So that's
you can definitely see that in picture books, that there's a huge range and variety of styles and people from all over the world illustrating books in many countries.
And young authors, young, you know, 20-year-old, you know, 18-year-old can start becoming an author, and you know, sometimes they have amazing ideas because they're fresh and they're coming up with a new generation. So that's also to watch out the new authors coming in. The next question would be, with the pandemic making home schooling and online learning more acceptable, how do you see the impacting of the market with the homeschooling?
So that's got a two-part answer to it.
Okay.
The pandemic has definitely forced people to do learning at home, and many of them are parents who wouldn't ordinarily have chosen homeschooling, and they don't like it, and they're saying so. And one of the things that's coming out of that is parents are actually saying, gee, I really appreciate what teachers are doing in school. And I wish I could get my kids back to school because that's where I want them to be. So I think it's interesting that some people like Bill Gates are saying, oh, well, you know, this shows we're just going to have to do more online learning. Actually, especially when it comes to elementary school and getting up even into middle school, there's really a lot of learning that needs to happen between individuals, whether it's between a parent and a child or between a teacher and a classroom of children. And as far as I can see, this is not going to cause schools to rush to do more online learning, except in this emergency situation. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and you can see this just in the sales figures that are now coming out for March and the beginning of April, books have actually continued to sell. Print books as well as ebooks have continued to sell, at least with the numbers that we can see. And parents were buying workbooks and nonfiction books and activity books in larger numbers as a result of having their kids at home.
Yeah.
But they were buying books of all kinds, which is an encouraging thing to see. And you know what the impact is going to be at the end, I don't know. I'm a skeptic about the idea that online learning is going to somehow get a big boost because, like I said, we've actually learned that online learning in a lot of situations is actually not ideal, and it can be a substitute, but not necessarily the best one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so we'll see.
Yeah, I think that this is something that was created by a need, right? Nobody had a plan B. I mean, you guys are much more lucky in terms of elementary schools being public or private. The system perhaps was ready to set up a plan B. In Brazil, we have private schools that they were ready in 3 days to set up education, a platform online. But you know, some of the universities at the public level, they couldn't put this together. So right now we're living a moment where there's a lot of young people at home not studying. And you know, 2 months have
So
passed.
even at the university level, wow.
In the public system. In the private system, of course, it's rolling. You know, my son is studying overseas and he is having classes every day. But because they have the platform, they have, you know, the tools, and they already had, they have a blackboard. They use the blackboard, you know,
Right.
and basically what is happening is that you have masters and you have PhDs that they are being offered already in an online format. So
Mm-hmm.
you know, for them and for elementary schools in the private, they were able to set it up. But
Well,
reality,
I think there's actually a similar situation in the United States, though at the university level, it's not so much of a disparity
yeah,
because so many people in the United States do have computers
yeah,
and access to the internet. So even public universities have been able to take stuff online. Where there's more of an issue is at lower levels, high school, middle school, and elementary school. And in the public school systems in the United States, there's tremendous disparity about access to an online setup. And parents in many public school systems do not have a good ability to get their kids into an online learning setup. So that has really been a huge problem. There's an issue of
yeah,
education equity
yeah.
that
You have something.
working class and poor parents don't have the same ability
Yeah.
to facilitate their kids continuing to learn as middle class and upper class parents do.
Yeah, this is important to share the information with the Brazilian audience because they probably, you know, would like to know that there is something called Tier 1 of the elementary system, which Tier 1 is public schools that they don't have the funds or they don't qualify for a blue ribbon school, where you have the parent-teacher association that does not exist in Brazil, that system. And the parent-teacher association is a huge deal because it's the group that fund all these projects, right? The materials. So you're right, in the tier one, probably it's difficult right now for a lot of parents not knowing what to do with their children at home. So definitely, yes. And of course the sales, you know, I think overall globally have raised online sales. Now we're gonna have to see the question mark, what is gonna happen after all this is, you know.
That's right. That's right. It's really hard to say how, you know, how it's going to play out in the longer term.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Once the you know, libraries open and the bookstores, I'm just curious to know, you know, what is going to happen, you know, because the reality too is we have to talk about the unemployment. Unemployment worldwide is going to affect sales, not just on books, but overall. So that's
certainly true. Yes.
The next question would be, okay, let me tell you something. We have 3 minutes. I was able to, well, I was listening to you put the link in the chat room. So everybody that is here with us, thank you so much for being here. And if you guys want to continue listening this conversation, as soon as this finish and kick us, because the system is going to kick us, actually, we can enter right to the next link. If there's a little overlay of time, just hold on it, because I'm not sure we can just enter right away, but it's set up.
So we can just copy that link out of the chat, and then once this finishes, we'll just paste that into our browsers and go into the next meeting.
And we're gonna play a game. We're gonna make this a fun game for whoever wants to continue following us on this conversation. I'm gonna throw the question, and you know, we're gonna see if Harold can say it in 2 minutes, or we'll go in part 1 and part 2.
So let's do one more question. Yeah.
Okay. So the next
before we jump.
That's fine. Will there be? Oh, well, I think we already talked about the emerging publishers, so we already said that. Given the current availability of low-cost digital tools, will the trend to self-publish become stronger with the children's authors and illustrations?
Okay, great question.
Yeah.
Do low-cost digital tools make self-publishing easier?
Yes.
And I would say that it's easier than it used to be. Certainly before, you know, electronic publishing was even possible. It's easier to create something that looks like a book. You can use digital tools to come up with essentially a book production file that can then be turned into an ebook, or can be sent to a print-on-demand company. And, you know, that's easier. But that's only a very small part of what self-publishing requires. Self-publishing requires all the other things that a publisher has to do to get a book ready, starting with editing it and copy editing it, and then designing and illustrating and producing the book. If you're going to do a print book, print on demand is very limited in terms of what you can create. So maybe you want to go to a printer, and in that case, you need someone with production experience. And once you've got the book created, you've still got sales and marketing and distribution.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people when I'm talking about self-publishing, just because you can easily produce something that looks like a book doesn't mean you've solved the whole problem.
Yeah. Yeah.